The engine coughed once, then died on the shoulder of a wide, empty highway, and the single-dad mechanic felt his chest tighten as he eased his battered truck behind the stalled patrol car, unaware that the next few minutes would reopen a wound he had buried for years and reshape the future he had nearly given up on. Heat shimmered off the asphalt, a siren blinked silently, and the smell of oil and dust carried memories he had learned to outrun, but never truly escaped. Before the story unfolds further, if you believe in kindness and second chances, and in the quiet moments where ordinary people choose to help, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel Grandma Dearie. Your support keeps stories like this alive and reminds the world that compassion still matters. He had been driving home from a late shift at the small town garage, hands rough and knuckles scarred, the radio low so he could think about bills and homework, and the promise he had made to his sleeping son that tomorrow would be better. The man's life had narrowed to essentials after his wife passed away, leaving him with a 6-year-old boy, a mortgage that felt like a mountain, and a heart that beat cautiously, as if any sudden hope might crack it open. Helping stranded motorists was second nature to him. Engines spoke a language he understood better than people. When he saw the patrol car with its hood raised and a lone officer leaning over the engine bay, he pulled over without hesitation, because that was who he had become after loss, someone who fixed what he could, even when he could not fix himself. As he stepped out, the wind carried the distant sound of tires on concrete and the smell of sun-warmed metal. He approached the open hood, eyes scanning belts and hoses, mind already mapping solutions. Then he looked up and time pressed its palm against his chest. The face beneath the uniform was one he never forgot, not because it was famous or cruel, but because it was etched into the night his life split in two. Years ago, after the accident that took his wife, he had stood on a rain-soaked road holding his son, shaking and numb, while flashing lights painted grief across the dark. The officer who guided him through that night, steady and calm while everything else fell apart, was standing here now, older, marked by time, but unmistakable. Recognition crashed over him, bringing back the sterile smell of the hospital, the paperwork he could barely read through tears, the way he learned that survival could feel like punishment. He swallowed the surge of emotion and focused on the engine, because that was safer. The patrol car had overheated, a simple failure with complicated consequences if left unattended. As he worked, memories layered themselves over the present. He remembered the months after the funeral when the garage lights were his sunrise and sunset, when he learned to braid hair and pack lunches, when sleep came in fragments and hope came rarely. He remembered the nights he sat in his truck after work, hands on the wheel, asking the dark how long a man could keep going before something gave way. The challenge was never just money or exhaustion. It was the quiet fear that his son would grow up learning strength from a father who felt hollow. The repair took longer than usual because his hands trembled, not from the heat, but from the weight of what this moment represented. The officer's presence brought back the truth that some people pass through our lives at the worst possible time and leave a mark that never fades. When the engine finally turned over and settled into a steady hum, relief washed through him, followed by a softer feeling he hadn't expected, gratitude not just for the past help, but for the chance to return it. The highway seemed less empty then, the sky wider, the world slightly kinder. Days later, change began quietly, the way it always does. A letter arrived at the garage, then another. The officer had spoken to someone about the mechanic's skill and integrity, about a man who stopped without being asked and worked without expecting praise. Soon, a steady stream of fleet vehicles needed maintenance, bringing reliable income and daylight hours back into a life that had been built in the shadows. The mechanic found himself home in time for dinner, listening to his son talk about school, noticing how laughter filled rooms that had once echoed. But the deeper change was inside him. Helping that day had loosened something tight around his heart. He began to believe that the night of the accident did not have to define the rest of his story. He volunteered to teach basic car care at the community center, standing in front of people who saw him not as a man broken by tragedy, but as someone who knew things worth sharing. He slept better. He smiled more. He started to plan, cautiously, for a future that included joy. The officer and the mechanic crossed paths again, not on the side of the road, but at a school event where children ran with reckless happiness. Watching his son laugh, the mechanic felt a surge of pride that was clean and bright. He understood then that strength was not the absence of pain, but the decision to keep offering help, even when help had once arrived too late. Life did not erase loss, but it could weave meaning through it, stitch by stitch, if a person kept showing up. As the years moved forward, the story of that roadside repair became something the mechanic told his son when lessons were needed. It was about stopping when you could keep driving, about recognizing faces not to reopen wounds, but to honor how far you had come. It was about how kindness travels in circles we cannot see, returning when we least expect it. The man who once froze at the sight of a uniform now stood steady, rooted in a life rebuilt with patience and purpose. If this story is touching your heart right now, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Grandma Dearie. Your engagement tells us these stories matter and helps them reach others who might need hope today. And before the ending, we have a special request for you. Please comment below and share what this story reminded you of, or who it made you think about. In the end, the single dad mechanic learned that the road does not only take from us, sometimes it gives back in unexpected ways. On a sunlit highway, with grease on his hands and memories in his chest, he chose to help, and in doing so, discovered that healing often begins the moment we extend ourselves beyond our own